call. Before we hand over to the moderator, just a few points of notice. Please, when you're not talking, be on mute. It seems that everyone is respecting that just now. Thank you for that. If you have questions, please post them in the chat box, and if needed, the moderator will reach out to you and ask you to verbally post your question again. So I think with those few points, we are ready to start the webinar, and we would like to hand the floor to our colleagues in the Child Poverty Initiative Global Theme, who are calling in as well. So please, Cicely, Samira, Richard, you are welcome to start your presentation.
Thanks so much, Michael. Hi, everybody. I'm very glad to be here together with Samira and Cicely from the global team and other colleagues, I think, wanting to join. And also sincere thanks to Child Rights Governance, who are our parent, I think, for this whole initiative, of which we're forming one component part, particularly looking at cost barriers affecting the poorest households in gaining access to basic services. So if we can just move along, I'm not in control of the slides, I think Camille is. Okay, so this toolkit, which is part of the overall fair financing toolkit, is looking at the cost barriers issue. It's been worked up with Samira's leadership from Save Canada as part of our global team, working with East African countries in particular, both in the drafting of the toolkit and in the case particularly of Tanzania so far, testing the application of the tools. We're trying to use these webinars to present the tools to a wider group to both give exposure to the country officers who have been involved in the piloting, and also to get feedback from participants on these webinars to further refine the toolkit. So this is the first of the 3 webinars that Michael and the CRG team have organized. This one looking at assessing financial barriers affecting poor households, and then webinars to come on political economy analysis and equitable budget analysis, respectively. If we move to the next slide. So here's the structure. I don't know if I'll manage to do a 10-minute introduction, but I'll do my best to get through it. And then we hand over to colleagues in Save the Children Tanzania to present their pilot test and the experience and results from that. Then we have a question and answer session, and then we'll go back to our CRG colleagues. So next slide. Okay, so this is an extract from, sorry, yeah, the person jumping on the rock. This is just to remind us of the overall thinking and assumption behind all of this work, that investing in children adequately and consistently for all societies is both a response to the rights of children, of all children, and to the need, if societies are to be prosperous and move towards sustained development as part of the Sustainable Development Agenda, that children be prioritized in society's investments, including public finance investments. We've referenced in particular the post-2015 framework that houses the SDGs, as well as the Addis Ababa Action Agenda that preceded the adoption of the SDGs by a few months in the Third International Conference on Financing for Development, has very good and strong language on the need to invest adequately and consistently in children. So that's the backdrop to our efforts to promote those practices by different countries. If we move along. Only through public spending can the basic services that children, particularly the poorest and most deprived children and their families require, be guaranteed. It takes both public sector organization and public sector investment, and therefore fair finance is one of the guarantees at the heart of our Every Last Child campaign, as well as the CRG global theme. And I think if you look here, there are really three aspects to the Fair Finance campaign. The first one is around raising revenues and spending revenues raised equitably as well as adequately. The second one is actually the subject of this webinar, which is removing cost barriers that poor families face to accessing services. And the third one is around making sure that all families have the minimum necessary economic means or financial security to meet their own children's basic needs on a continuous basis. And this would include, for example, our and others' humanitarian response in situations of severe shock to family income, to make sure that families have adequate incomes from external support. Moves to the next one. And to the next one. Okay, so the cost barriers toolkit aims to provide guidance for us in Save the Children to undertake rapid assessments and gather evidence on the financial barriers that families face, particularly accessing health services, including nutrition within health services, schooling, education services, and clean water and sanitation services, which sometimes are tucked under health, but also can be seen as distinct. So it's not enough only that these services should be present and physically accessible to poor families in every community. They should also be financially accessible. In other words, the cost of accessing these services needs to be reasonable, even for poor families, costs that they can bear. And this is in order for us to design, where necessary, both policy advocacy and engage in policy dialogue for the reduction or removal of cost barriers, but also to inform our own interventions such that they we ourselves, through our own efforts and working with partners, can directly act to reduce cost barriers that poor families face. The toolkit is meant to provide a basis through assessment of the situation that poor families face, so we can either engage in policy dialogue or act directly to reduce barriers. Let's go to the next one. So in focus communities, conducting assessments. This includes focus group discussions and key informant interviews, potentially. The toolkit provides research guides that can look at different contexts and also sector-specific cost barriers. So if we want to look primarily at access to health and the cost of accessing health services, or education and school services, or protection and welfare services, we are developing optional menus in the toolkit that can use and apply to these different sectors and contexts. How to conduct focus group discussions and key informant interviews, and how to then use both qualitative data as well as quantitative information in order to draw conclusions through analysis of the types of barriers that families face. Go to the next one. Just as a background, it's not even, I think, readily appreciated in Save the Children that children are the poorest people in the world. Of all the extremely poor people in the World Bank estimates that exactly half are children, 50.2%. That means extreme poverty rates are much higher among children than among adults or the general population. So even if we were looking at the purely headcount case for focusing on children as the poorest people, that is overwhelming, and this applies to all societies except about 3 which have very strong welfare cash transfers to children. I think they're all in Scandinavia or Northern Europe. Apart from those 3 that I've found over the years, almost every other society, children are the poorest people. So don't, colleagues, be ashamed of making the case for prioritizing children in in poverty reduction efforts. Next slide. The impacts of poverty bear directly on our breakthroughs. So some quotations here from children in South Sudan, in Bangladesh and Jordan. There are many that we have in, say, the Children's Data Bank of Child Testimony. The impacts of poverty are pervasive and apply to all of our breakthroughs. To put it another way, unless we address child poverty as a fundamental issue affecting children who are likely not to survive, not to be well nourished, not to complete a basic education, and to be exposed to violence and protection failures. Unless we address that poverty, we are not going to reach our breakthroughs. Next slide. So some of the key concepts around the removal of cost barriers are as follows. Social protection can help families through cash transfers and other forms of transfers to have sufficient income and cash in the household to afford to be able to take a child to the clinic when she is sick, to enroll a child in school and keep her there, and to seek protection, including birth registration as a protective measure, for example, when a child is vulnerable to violence. Therefore, we advocate not only for social protection, but child-sensitive social protection, which responds to the particular needs and vulnerabilities of children, and that this kind of child-sensitive social protection should be gender-sensitive. In other words, it looks at the different needs and vulnerabilities of girls and boys at different ages within the household, and his programs and policies are designed accordingly. Next slide. Can we move to the next? Thanks. It's important that we think of the different types of barriers that poor families face. Obviously, direct costs when you're charged for taking a child to the clinic, access costs, taking the bus there, or what it costs in terms of, having to get accommodation in another village and wait to attend the clinic, or a child that's attending a school outside his or her neighborhood. Indirect costs, such as needing to buy books, buy school uniforms, buy linen or bedding at a hospital. And the opportunity costs, the time as well as energy costs of having to take a child to a clinic or to a distant water point. The energy and time taken to collect water when it's not readily available is an opportunity cost, because the woman or girl who normally fetches the water could have been doing something else, like learning or attending school in the meantime. So we want to look with this toolkit at these different kinds of cost barriers and explore to what extent they exist for accessing different kinds of basic services. Go to the next one. We want to look at potential strategies that we can use in Save the Children for assessing the cost barriers. So first assessing them, and then precisely we'll come on to addressing them. So looking at the existing policy and legal frameworks around how services should be provided, building on our child rights situation analysis and work already done to assess the barriers, looking at other forms of literature that may already exist within the country or at local level on these costs, and then, as I say, using primarily two means to collect qualitative data and to quantify that qualitative data, focus group discussions and key informant interviews. These are the main building blocks of the assessment phase of the toolkit. Move to the next one. I won't go into detail here. You can find more detail in the toolkit. There's sampling methodologies that we describe using purposive samples and deviant case sampling, identifying the key stakeholders who would include children themselves and caregivers in very poor families, and providing protocols for data collection and for safeguarding children in the assessment and interview processes. Next one. how to conduct qualitative data analysis, again covered in the toolkit, and how to estimate costs that families face, including looking at ranges and averages in families' own estimates of the costs that they encounter. Next one. Stacey, I think this is where you take over, isn't it? I hand over to you on this one in terms of the types. Once we have the assessment and analysis of the data we've collected in the use of the toolkit, the different types of policy actions that Save the Children could advocate for and support.
Yes, thank you, Richard. So essentially, most of the change that's required for a sustainable approach to poverty reduction needs to happen at the policy level. You know, I mean, we can provide supports, stopgap supports as NGOs, but you know, if we really want to reduce and eliminate, in fact, poverty, this is something that governments really have to deliver on, and so policy and advocacy action is very important. So the toolkit acknowledges that and looks at a number of different sort of examples of types of policies which would be necessary, policy change that would be necessary in different contexts. And all of this would be dependent on the analysis that has been done that Richard described earlier on. So some examples. User fees, of course, for essential services. This is something that is very much embedded in a lot of the work that we do as Save the Children. We are very strongly in favor of, for example, universal health services or coverage. We are looking to reduce or eliminate school fees. So in low resource situations, we also have to work with governments to perhaps look at targeting removal or reduction of fees to certain categories of very poor families and children. But the goal should be one of reducing fees overall or eliminating fees overall. Reduce or eliminate incidental or ancillary charges. So these would be, again, charges that are compulsory in order to access services. Again, things like bed-litten fees, drug charges in hospitals, uniform fees, and book fees for school. Improve the quality, geographic accessibility, and coverage of essential services. So this is about those opportunity costs that Richard mentioned, and when people have to travel a great distance because they don't have a clinic or the school in their vicinity is of poor quality, that's a problem. Ensure affordability or free access to clean water and sanitation services. We all, people who have worked a lot in our health, teams know how important clean water is to reduce under 5 mortality, to reduce exposure to waterborne illnesses. But there's also then, in terms of accessing free water, again, what Richard mentioned, this notion of women usually and girls having to travel great distances. It's an opportunity cost, it's a protection issue. So again, getting affordable access or free access to clean water and sanitation services is quite key. And then lastly, it is again about the increasing income for families. And this is where the conversation around social protection is so important. Making sure that caregivers have sufficient resources to be able to access essential services and I would say also obviously nutritious food and medicine and what have you. Not all costs are borne by government that parents face. Some are market based, and therefore it's important for parents and caregivers to be able to have sufficient income to provide for the necessities of life for their kids. So now I think that sums it up. I believe, Camille, can you go to the next slide just so we can check and see if child poverty. So now I believe we hand over to Tanzania to describe for us their cost barriers pilot.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we cannot see this the slide the same as you guys over there. However, so we use the backup presentation that was sent to us. And we apologize for any inconvenience that might be caused with that. Well, Save the Children Tanzania country office, we choose to pilot the cost barriers toolkit and to do the assessment of the financial barriers to access education and children protection service while they are in school. Well, there are many reasons that has drive us for us to choose to pilot the cost barriers on those two themes. However, the key is that according to the government of Tanzania and UNICEF report in 2016, it shows that approximately 74% of Tanzanian children live in multidimensional poverty. 74% of 25 million Tanzanian children right now, because according to the national census that was conducted in 2012, we have over 25 million currently in Tanzania. So we are speaking about 18 million of children who are living under multidimensional poverty. The implementation of child rights policies and programs here in Tanzania is very challenged, and this is due to the inadequate budget allocation to various ministries, including Ministry of Health, Community Development, Gender, Elder, and Children, same to Zanzibar. But also there is a clear research evidence to show that there's lack of investment, planning and prioritization, as well as equitable allocation of resources to key underlying factors to poor services delivered here in Tanzania, to those children here in Tanzania. Due to those reasons, Save the Children here in Tanzania has therefore committed to place a specific emphasis on the 2016-2018 strategic period of investing to make sure there is access to affordable basic services. Next slide, please. Well, coming to the focus and scope of the pilot we did here in Tanzania, we conducted the pilot in 3 districts. Temeke, in Dar es Salaam, Temeke is a suburban district here in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and there's a lot of households that are living under poverty, and that's also that's the main reason why we chose to pilot this toolkit to Temeke. We've also piloted in Unguja, South Unguja in Zanzibar Island, as well as Mbozi district in Songwe region. So Mbozi and Unguja South are among the rural district. The methodology we use. We've used both qualitative and quantitative, but on qualitative part, we developed a research guide basing on the questions that were provided from the toolkit. We translated that research guide in Swahili in order to fit with the context here, because in Tanzania, the main mode of communication here, the language is Swahili. And we were able to field test it in Msanyila village. When we designed that research guide, we make sure we're able to collect to get the in-depth and contextual information on the cost barriers and the impact of these financial barriers happening to children in poor households. In terms of secondary data, which is forming now the quantitative research, we reviewed various reports and also compile different quantitative data that are relevant to the study that we have conducted. Main source of those information is from the National Bureau of Statistics, UNICEF, as well as administrative data from ministries. We are lucky that in Tanzania currently they are operating under the open data policy, and various ministries have posting their data set in the open portal that everyone can access that portal. In terms of research method on the qualitative research where we collected the primary information, we have used mainly focus group discussions, in-depth interview with very key informants in the community. We have also chose to use participatory research methods such as drawing, especially in a very rural areas and with young children during the focus group discussion with them. The sampling was purposive. For example, in focus group discussion with in-school children, we really focus in getting children who are aged between 6 and 15. However, in secondary school, we go a little bit further up to children below the age of 17, because here in Tanzania, the basic education up to secondary school goes for children who are in secondary school, the maximum age can go up to even 18. But for us, we choose at least to go up to 17 years. The total number of participants who participated in the pilot, we had around 338 participants, individual participants, but by putting them in groups, we had around 28 focus group discussion and 40 key informant interview around those three districts. So in total, we can say that we interviewed around 58% of the participants were children. Next slide. Well, what are the preliminary findings that you are getting from the data we've collected? So far, speaking about the direct cost, in terms of school fees, we don't, currently the government of Tanzania has eliminated all the direct, the school fees as well as contributions that initially parents were contributing. So it's, we have a fee-free education policy here in Tanzania. However, there are some other indirect costs which we are very interested now to find. So there are other costs that we identified they still exist, and it becomes a barrier for those children to attend school. Among those, uniform, and with the uniform cost, in urban areas, the costs are a bit higher compared to the rural areas. Just for example, in rural areas, primary in a rural area cost around 23 to 37 USD. We have actually converted those amounts from Tanzanian shilling from the information that we've obtained from the participant. In secondary school, the primary, the uniform cost actually cost around 50 to 68 in rural areas compared to 55 to 84 USD in urban secondary schools. In terms of menstrual hygiene products, this is specifically for girls because girls has to buy those sanitary pads, which is a kind of a monthly cost. So the cost varies, it's almost similar in urban and rural. Cost is the same, which is 1.4 USD, goes up to 2.3 USD per month. And in terms of meals, school meals here in Tanzania, the information is very different because not all the schools here are providing meals to children while they're in school. However, parents are supposed to give kind of a pocket money to those children to spend while they are in the school. So the cost varies from one district to another. Even in terms of rural and urban, the cost is different. However, you might have noted that cost for the primary students are a bit, they can say almost similar, and it varies from 0.14 to almost 1.1 USD per child per day in each school. And what happened is that we've noted, for example, in rural areas, parents were willing to contribute some certain amount of money so that their children can have meals while they're in school. However, there was a challenge in urban areas because the government has already announced that education is free in Tanzania. So parents, they think that now they are free from all the costs that are related to children while they're in school. So there's a lot of challenges. So actually most of the urban school here in Tanzania, they don't really provide school meals. So the cost that you are seeing there is just a small pocket money, and not all children are being given that amount. There are almost, I can say 75% of the children are not being given those pocket money. So it's like when they're leaving from home, if they didn't eat anything, and that is up to the evening when they are going back home. Next slide. Well, in terms of other preliminary findings on part of service usage, we have noted that overall enrollment for both boys and girls in primary and secondary school in all the 3 districts has increased, and this is due to the elimination of the direct cost like fee-free and other contributions, like I've mentioned earlier. We have also noted that boys are actually dropping out more compared to girls. And this is not only the findings from the qualitative information, but we've also backed up the information from the quantitative data, be it on the demographic health survey report that was 2015-2016, which has been disseminated by the National Bureau of Statistics. It has also agree with these findings that actually there are a large number of boys who are dropping out compared to girls. But the top 3 reasons are corporal punishment of HP, lack of school necessities, and also boys having to work to supplement household income. This might be kind of a surprise to some of the people, because to them, they used to see that girls are dropping out more compared to girls. However, this is not a case nowadays. So most of the communities here, actually there's a lot of awareness going on in the community. So parents actually, they know that now once you send your girl child to school, there's a lot of opportunities or potential for that child to reach further compared to a boy child. So what they do, they did kind of a switch. So they are sending more their girls, and then their boys are being left home to help with the raising household income, participating in various income generating activities. However, to some of the communities, they are sending more girls child to school for the primary education. When they reach to secondary now, that's where the problem comes. There are some they are choosing to marry off those girls early, or because sometimes they are afraid that those girls, they might get pregnancy. So there's kind of mixing information that around that. But all in all, we have confirmed that boys are dropping out more compared to girls. In terms of service quality, children in both rural and suburban areas indicated that they like their school and teachers. However, learning environment is very poor, and there's scarcity of learning equipment. teachers to pupils ratio is very, very high. It's even very far above the national standard. Now that the education is tempted to be free, and I've mentioned that the enrollment has increased. Actually, there's a disaster in those school classes. Has been flooded with highest number of children. Actually, we've in almost two of the schools that we've visited, one class having more than 125 pupils in one class. And sometimes those children now, because the lesson is very hot, so what happened in that, you can imagine having 125 children in one class studying. So sometimes the teachers opt to take those children out under the tree, and so they continue with the studies. However, now being challenges with the issue of environment. Now it's a rain season, so you can imagine what is happening here in the community. So, however, another finding in terms of gender, both girls and boys think that education is important, and also that goes to the parents. They do think that it's very important to send children to school regardless of the gender. Most girls don't go to school during their menstrual period, and that is a very huge problem right now. There are a number of organizations that have already identified this as a key issue, and programs that are going on helping providing sanitary pads to school. So hopefully in the near future, currently it's a big issue. However, so we are hoping that in the near future, probably either government or there will be some sort of sustainable activity going on, helping these girls to remain in school in spite being in their menstrual periods. Coming to access costs, almost all primary pupils in both rural and urban areas go to school on foot, and that is, I can say, is over 99.9% of those children are going to school on foot. There are very, very few who use bicycles to go to school, and the cost for one bike actually is around 68 USD. Most of secondary school in rural areas go to school again on foot, but in urban areas, some of them use public buses, or they hire motorcycles to take them to school. So the cost for transport for public as well as motorcycles vary from 0.4 USD per one child up to 1.4 USD. That is for return trip, like 2 ways going to return. Actually, with the transport cost, there's a difference in terms of accessing school for primary and secondary. Most of primary schools here in Tanzania, actually, they're being allocated in a manner that every village or every street should have its own primary school. So you can say most of the primary schools are within the compound area that children can reach on foot. However, there are some few parents who choose to enroll their children far from the normal local primary school. That's where now a problem comes with the demand for transport fee or transport costs. However, there also, we've noted there are some parents, the issue of movement or migrating from one community to another. That's also caused those primary schools from poor households to incur a transport cost for them to access school. But all in all, even the government is assuming that all primary pupils should not have the transport cost, because all the streets and villages should have at least one primary school. But it's different from secondary school, because for secondary school, the policy say at least one ward should have one secondary school. So you can find one ward that serving around 5 4 to 5, even 6 villages. So you find a student can walk around. We found one student walk around 16 kilometers per day, like 8 kilometers to school and then 8 kilometers back to school every single day. Okay, in terms of opportunity costs, all children in both rural and urban areas help their parents with their normal household costs. However, we've noted some of the children who are working for other people in order to get money. And when we ask how do they use those money, almost all of them, they indicated that they use those money to help buy household meals, as well as school necessities like shoes. So a child can work and get around 0.4 USD for, and then accumulate that amount for her to manage at least to get a shoe or a school bag for those who are living in urban. So for all the 3 regions, there are some children who are working for, it's kind of a child labor. In Zanzibar, actually, also it's a very active issue now with the issue of children working in terms of them being in school. Well, next, finalizing the preliminary findings on the part of children protection while in the school. There are a number of violences against children we've noted. One is physical humiliation, punishment. This is very key. Bullying, molestation, sexual harassment, forced sexual practices. However, coming to analyze cost barriers to access children protection, it was very difficult for us to get the information because to all of the 3 communities we piloted, we've noted that people have, they don't have knowledge what violence is. So for them, for example, the issue of PHP is very normal. It's normal for them. It's normal for teacher to to punish a child or to. So for them, they don't really understand what violence is. So it was really difficult to get the information, considering the fact that parents are doing whatever that teachers are treating those children. Okay, coming the next slide. This is part where now we're presenting the lesson learned. Part 1 on the issue of research process. In overall, we've noted that the research guide was very customizable as well as adaptable, because we are able to customize according to our own context. For example, with the exception on our side, on part of parents with children out of school, it was a very big issue for us here, but we have noted that especially in both region, because the issue is in Tanzania there is a law which says that all school age children should be in school, and parents will be answerable if found that your child is not in school while she or he is supposed to be in school. But the level of enforcement of that law is different from one region to another. So that's why when we were in Mbozi, we couldn't get a parent for out-of-school children because they were scared to participate, thinking that we came from the government office and we were just setting a trap for them to come out so that we can sending them to police for not sending their children to school. So despite the fact that explaining it to the village leaders, and even village leaders try to call them to explain to them this is just a research, they didn't agree to participate. However, we managed to get almost 3 parents with their children. So we had to change the methodology now. Instead of now having a focus group discussion, we changed it now to have a face-to-face kind of an interview with them. And for children, we decided to use a life history, to get a history about their life for those children, for us to get at least to understand why they are not in school and the challenges that they are facing. We have noted that questionnaire could be administered at the household level, and it can be included in the toolkit in addition to the focus group discussion and the other qualitative method. Having that will help us to quantify the individual responses, as well as to scale up the findings. Because the same case of parents with children who are out of school, it was different case when we conducted the pilot in Temeke. In Temeke, most of the parents came out. Actually, they were not afraid of the law. They are aware that the law is there, but they were not afraid. And we got actually we were surprised that in urban areas there were a lot of children who were out of school, and that they really needed to go back to school, but there was a lot of challenges. Actually, we had to send some of the children back because we had a lot of children and we couldn't manage, having them, because we had our criteria set for us to for those children to participate on our study. We've also noted that participatory methods were effective in conducting focus group discussion with the young children, especially in the rural areas. Those children were very, very shy. So when we conducted a participatory method like drawing, they were very active and gave us a very important information. Finally, in terms of lesson learned on the research process, the gender and age of the participant we've noticed to be a very crucial factor to be considered while arranging for field activities. Next slide, please. Well, to finalize my presentation on the lesson learned in terms of the cost barriers on access to education and protection in school, we've learned that there are several contextual factors that are influencing children's participation, as well as dropout rate, and that those are additional to cost barriers. Violence against children in school appears to be normalized, as I've already explained. And the issue of this, considering the fact that there's a very little knowledge among parents and community in general in terms of those violences and children protection. So we have a lot to do around that area. Cost barriers to schooling are substantial, and the impact have an impact on participation in school by learners from poor households. We have noted that there is one government program, social protection program called TASAF, Tanzania Social Action Fund. It is very active across the three communities, Songwe, Unguja, and Temeke. Those actually the program is focused on helping or reducing poverty among the very, very poor household in the communities. So they are providing, they have a conditional cash transfer program. They are providing a small amount of money to the household, depending on the number of children that particular household have, as well as the nature of that child, whether the child is disabled. So the amount of money also a bit increased compared to if you have a household have a normal child. And also if a child is, let's say, in primary school, they are being given different amount of money compared to the child who is going to secondary school. So there's a lot of positive remark or response to that program. They're saying it's very helpful, and even teachers actually acknowledge, saying that after now TASAF helping those households, those children who were dropping out before, they are now being enrolled back to school. Another big lesson we've learned is that school uniforms, stationery, books, and transport costs are among the most expensive items for poor household. Actually, they actually comment that if they being helped with this cost, actually they'll be able at least now to send their children to school and be able to provide them with the school with the right amount for school pocket money as well as school meals. For them, they think that at least they can manage with the school meals. But with the uniform, stationery, books, and transports, difficult for them. But also, they went further, saying that it's actually very expensive to send a child to secondary school compared to primary school. Because, like I've said, or you could remember from the initial slide on the direct cost, actually for a child to go in secondary school is far very expensive compared to primary. The last lesson learned for us was that eliminating those direct costs is not really a guarantee for for children to be included, or the children to be included be in school. So there are other intra-household dynamics and contextual factors, as well as the indirect and hidden costs that act as a barrier to these children to go back to school. I think that is it from Tanzania. I welcome you all for questions and discussion. Hello?
Thanks so much. So, Michael, are you moderating?
Well, I think I was asked actually to moderate the chat box.
Go ahead,
So we did have a couple of questions that came up, some of which were answered in the the box, but because not everybody follows the chat box, I think we should just ask the team in Tanzania to actually respond to it. So one question was, it seems that girls have more financial barriers than boys, but that boys drop out more. So if you could speak to that and to the differential in terms of dropout, in terms of gender, also in terms of age, whether there's a difference in terms of when girls versus boys drop out, that would be helpful. The other note was about uniform costs. And so a total cost over the primary school duration, or is this a yearly cost? So that was another question that came up. And I think that was the only...
Yeah, could I just add to that? Maybe, I'll write it as well, but if I could just add, is there any discussion in Tanzania and elsewhere of actually abolishing school uniforms? Because it seems to be a pervasive barrier to poor families to having their children attend school. It seems like a massive tax on poor families to get education with very dubious benefits. It's been my position for 30 years, but just wondering if that's an issue in Tanzania.
Okay, so if you could, folks, we'll start with those, and then we'll open it up for questions by the broader group.
Okay, thank you. I will respond to that, and then my colleagues will be able to add more if I left anything. Okay, on question one, on the dropout, why that boys are dropping more compared to girls, and the fact that looking at the cost, girls are having more, the cost for them is higher compared to boys. Well, the reasons actually is different in a sense that in rural areas we found that those the boys are given the inheritance at very early ages. With inheritance, I mean that most of those boys in the household are given some part of the, let's say for example, a boy coming from pastoralist family, they're given properties like cows for them to handle, and they're being told that that is what you'll be inherited from us, the proportional part of the inheritance. So for that, boys, they don't see the importance of education for them, because for them they think that I'm going to school in order to get money, But if I concentrate much on looking more into my property or on my cows, I'll be able to earn more compared when, because they are seeing their fellows graduating in standard 7, and then they're in the community, they're not going anywhere. So they're being kind of less motivated. And also the fact that I've mentioned there is corporal punishment, that is PHP in schools. So for them that they cannot really struggle, like, going to school and having being punished for the reason that they think that they should not be punished. So they really lose interest in going to school. But for girls, they don't have, because they're seeing their brothers being given those, a proportional part of the inheritance, while for them they don't have any. So they see that the only key escape for them is education. So if they think that if they really invest in education, they can be a way for them, to win in life. But also the issue of escape from the household calls, because most of these girls are being participating in helping their parents more on the normal household chores like cooking, cleaning, swimming, taking care of the children. So for girls, I think that education, going to school, is a kind of escape from those activities in the household. So that is part of in the rural areas. In the urban, specifically speaking about Temeke, actually boys, there is a lot of peer pressure, they're saying, among boys. They are participating in sports betting. It's very, nowadays here in Dar es Salaam, it's very, I can say, popular, the sports betting. And also there are some other kind of now talented or entertainment activities which involve children. They are getting amount of money out of that. So, and on top of that, there's the care that are being given to boys are very different from what has been given to girls. So if a boy is not going to school, the parent will not care much, because you are a boy, so you can manage yourself. So for them, they don't see the importance of education. And also the employment rate here in Tanzania, or rather Dar es Salaam, is very high. It's very common nowadays to see your brother graduating from the university or being a doctor, from other professional, just staying at home, don't have work to do. So you can imagine a child who is in secondary or in primary. For them, they're saying that you should study hard for you at least, to get a better job. They don't see the value for that, especially for boys. So they really focus on what they are doing. And it's different for girls here in school. Again, with the reason for them escaping from the normal household chores in their household, but there's a lot of a keen eye to those girls that you're a girl, you have to be in school. Even teachers are concerned why you're not going to school, or if a girl doesn't go to school. Even the parents also, they are concerned about, they are monitoring. Actually, you can say that girls are very closely monitored compared to boys. So that's, I can say, the main reason. Even in Zanzibar, it's a similar case. Boys are also dropping out more compared to girls. It's all over Tanzania, and even the national statistics has indicated that.
Thank you, Anita. Are there any other questions that people would like to ask the team?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, on the part of, in terms of gender and level, whether primary and secondary, which they're dropping out more. Actually, it's across primary and secondary. Even if you can, even if you go through the basic education statistics report provided by Ministry of Education, it's actually again presenting the information both. There's high dropout for boys in both primary and secondary, and also even from the demographic health survey report that was for 2015-2016. There also a clear mark or comment regarding dropping out of boys in school compared to girls.
Okay, so thanks. Sorry.
Those costs are per year. In terms of uniform costs, they are per year basis.
Okay.
Uniform.
Sorry, Anita, I keep cutting you off.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for the team, or for myself or Richard?
If I may, this is Michael from Copenhagen with Camille. We posted a question in the chat box on to which degree Tanzania has been able to work with partners in the pilot and what the experiences are in that regard.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Oh, there are a couple more. My apologies.
Okay. Hello?
Yes, the question is, how much has Tanzania been able to work with partners?
Okay, actually we've managed to involve a number of partners during data collection activities. Number one, we involved University of Dar es Salaam, who has helped us to collect the information and try at least, to review some of the questions that were presented on the guide, research guide. And also in Dar es Salaam, we've worked with a community-based organization, namely Baba Watoto. And similar to Mbozi, we have worked with ADP, which is also a community-based organization. In Unguja, we have worked with organization for the social community workers called ZASWA.
Okay, so there's a question from Katrina Boo about how will CPOV and CRG global themes follow up lessons learned from Tanzania to other program countries, and what are the plans for the wider implementation of the toolkit? I think I'll ask our CRG colleagues who are leading this effort, and we are supporting it, to do so, but I can say that we already did have a bit of a conversation before this when speaking to the Tanzania colleagues about having to, get together to talk about advocacy in their country as a follow-through to this work, and we will be doing that as well with the other countries that have piloted. And so then I'll leave it to CRG to comment on the dissemination more broadly of the toolkit.
Could I just say one thing before we go to that? Back to CRG, if that's okay, Michael? Mm-hmm. Thanks. I mean, first of all, sincerest thanks to our colleagues in Tanzania, both for undertaking the pilot and to presenting and reporting on this. One of the big takeaways for me was that when discussions actually take place with families, with caregivers and children, it turns out that financial barriers are only one of many types of barriers that they want to put forward and discuss that they experience. So it raised the question to me whether even it makes sense to talk about financial barriers in isolation from all other kinds of barriers, but I think we can talk about that further. And as we said, I think Cicely has mentioned other countries in Eastern and Southern Africa are moving ahead to pilot this, so perhaps we get more perspectives with further pilots, but this has been extremely valuable, I think. So thanks so much. CRG colleagues, over to you.
Yeah, Lena here. I can answer that, or try to answer that. So the idea is that after we have the learnings from the pilots, we will update the tool, and hopefully Richard and Cicely and Shamira, you will be part of that as well. Also in contact with some colleagues from UNICEF that we might want to review the tool as well. I know we have had external peer reviewers already, but it might be good to see if we could collaborate with UNICEF on this and maybe pilot it or test it in more countries together with UNICEF. We also have our fair financing working group that we will definitely share the tool with and also get comments and feedback from that group. And then we have had some members being interested. For instance, Save the Children Spain is interested in piloting the political economy tool, which would be really interesting to do in a very different context and in a domestic program. So I think we'll look for more opportunities to test the tool and to finalize it, and then we will obviously contact all our investment in children programs and see who will be interested in using the tool. And I think we also have an agreement with Save the Children Norway that some of the countries that are supported on investment in children through their NORAD program might be interested in using the tool. But maybe you know that, Katarina. And then finally, we are planning a global workshop on public investment in children, which will be the workshop where we talk about how this can become a common approach for Save the Children. And I guess that would also be an opportunity to share the tool and to see who else would be interested in using it. I think the final link that I want to make is to the CRSAs. We know that the CRSA guideline is supposed to be updated this year, and I think some of the key questions in some of these tools might be really interesting to include in child rights situation analysis as well. So for me, there are different ways forward how we can use this tool, and of course bringing it in as a resource as part of our common approach on public investment in children is for sure an immediate step that we will take. But I think it could be interesting to try it out in more countries and get more results and see it more as a learning document that might evolve a bit over time, and not something that is just fixed and this is how we do it now, because I think every time you test it you might learn something, so we need to find a way of incorporating that learning moving forward.
We also have another question from Marine, who wanted to know what is the detailed ask on increasing family income, and then she'd also asked Richard to share a link on the World Bank child poverty numbers, which Richard did in the chat box, share a link, a UNICEF link, but I'm sure it's the same numbers. What I would say in terms of what the detailed ask is on increasing family income, of course, part of that is highly contextual, right? Because some countries have some social protection mechanisms already, or they have them in the case of in response to humanitarian, and so you have to, or they don't have any at all, or they're insufficient. And so the one thing that is standard across all countries is that we're asking for social protection mechanisms to be child sensitive. So that is the common ask, and there is a definition of what child sensitivity is, but essentially it is that they do the maximum benefit and do the least amount of harm. And so this is about actually doing the analysis around how social protection systems are impacting children, both in positive and then potentially negative ways, and then to mitigate or eliminate the negative impacts on children. So it's really about asking governments or organizations that are engaged in support or delivery of social protection to do the extra work in the analysis and the design and analysis of these programs. But in terms of, the detailed ask in terms of how much money or, how that money is distributed or all those sort of granular pieces will be very much dependent on what the country context is.
Yeah, thanks. If I can just add, firstly, I've circulated the joint paper of the Global Coalition to End Child Poverty, which is 20 agencies co-led by us and UNICEF. And secondly, I think, in my view, the issue is around progressive expansion of national social protection systems. That includes where they don't exist, is that, you know, expand from 0 to 1 and then beyond. But as countries raise more taxation and allocate more spending, either proportionately or in absolute terms, to social protection, including cash transfers and other forms of benefits, as Cicely said, that should be done in such a way that children are verifiably benefiting. In other words, let's not blow it on, you know, food subsidies that go to the middle class and have no impact on child nutrition, but rather in that kind of situation, potentially on child grants or even pensions that are spent on children to a greater degree. So progressive expansion, but with verifiable impact for children as national systems expand.
Hi, this is Mulu. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for a great presentation and really interesting findings from Tanzania as well. Just on the point that you made, Lena, about taking this tool forward, I was just wondering how we are going to use it even for thematically laid programs. For example, if a health thematic program is looking at health care financing strategy in a specific country, or education financing strategy in a specific country, how can we actually push this into the thematic programs working with the other global themes, in addition to probably having this macro level analysis, whether we, as part of the CRSAs or as part of a planning tool like Save the Children Norway would like to use this and other tools as they look into their framework agreement. So I was just wondering, how can we do that as well? Bring into thematic programs. I don't have an answer, but I think we have to look into that as well, because it can be used at that level, even to do some analysis thematically.
If I can just add to that, I think it's very important we think about if there are some of this that we can include in the CRSA. Of course, also being cautious that we say that, you know, every time we have a new topic, whether it's gender or most deprived or whatever it is, we say we need to include some of that into the CRSS guidance, and we also have to manage that process so it doesn't become a PhD. But I think that just making people aware of some of these key questions to be asked in the CRSA might lead them to being more interested in doing a more in-depth analysis on some of this. And then we have the tool and hopefully some colleagues in the office who can support people using that. I think the other thing is that in the working group on fair finance for children, it's really not a CRG group, it's a cross-organizational group. And I believe we have all the advocacy people from the other global themes in that group as well. So we will also present it to that group and make sure that they know that it exists and that they can also use it and talk to the communities under their thematic area about this tool, because I completely agree that it's not a tool that's linked to child poverty or child rights governance work alone. It can, of course, be used across all the thematic areas, and one could even argue that some of the findings from these analyses is something that you actually need to know to be able to do a good program on any of our thematic areas.
Yeah, thanks.
May I add just a few comments to what Lena just said? This is Michael from Copenhagen. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Just adding to what Lena said, I think the financing toolkit, both the financial barriers dimension, but also the equity budgets and the political economy analysis that we'll talk about in the next two webinars, are in essence cross-thematic. Now, in the examples that we have heard from Tanzania, I think we're focusing on education, but we can easily expand or ask the same questions in relating to, for example, health or nutrition. So we can expand this in to any number of areas that are relevant for children's access to services. Now, particularly on financial barriers, we have the option to collect primary data. We'll get information which is not necessarily already known by government or other partners. And we can use that both for thematic advocacy, for more resources to address the issues that we have found, but we can also use it for our programmatic engagements that we support. So it actually has application both for our own work and for how we engage with other partners in the area. So it has a wide application, and I'm so pleased with the pilots that we have conducted, or we are conducting, that we're actually reaching out to many different areas and seeing how this toolkit can be used in various contexts and in with various thematic linkages. Thank you.
Mm.
Hi, are we done, or is there some more?
So I think there was one more question that hasn't been answered by Eileen Deluise.
By Maureen?
No, Eileen. Let me retrieve the question. Eileen Deluise.
Yes, hi, this is Eileen from Western Central Africa. I was just wondering from the Tanzania team, or if we have other examples of how the results of this assessment will inform not only our advocacy work, but also our education programming in the field.
Thanks for the question. This is Jasminka, an advocacy person from Tanzania speaking. Actually, Saisley and I, and Samira as well, we tackled that issue briefly just before the call. And it's about like not encapsulating this particular piece of work and, treating it as something that, is going to be shelved in our office, but rather taking it to the next level, which means that, for instance, in our particular situation, we are going to launch the cost barrier analysis together with the Stolen Childhood Index next month. And that's something that's been agreed here in the office. And I feel that, by doing that, we are combining both global in terms of Save the Children International and national in terms of what's going on here in our country. And I think that, it's a good thing to do because we conducted this particular analysis in 3 places across the country. In Zanzibar, in one of the key areas where we are, by the way, operational in some way, which is like Mbeya region, and also in Dar es Salaam, where we have a long record of child rights governance activities during the previous long SIDA-funded CRG project. So I think that, by doing that and extracting the main messages, including the ones, I'm constantly thinking about our focus here in the country in terms of campaign is on girls. So the focus is on ending child marriage, but what about the boys? And luckily, in Zanzibar, we have a famous Baba Bora campaign, a campaign that is celebrating masculinity and celebrating the roles of fathers and brothers and, those male people in the family. So I think that, probably one of the messages that we are going to use in our advocacy from now onwards would be around making sure that boys should be in schools together with girls, which is not the case. And, something that Anita spoke about earlier. And also, this is not the only advocacy message that we will have in mind while planning and budgeting our advocacy, but for many reasons, I think that, this is just one big step for us and something that we are going to utilize as much as possible in our policy-driven advocacy and in our activities around the campaign.
Thank you, Jasminka. Thank you all for your questions. I will move on to the last session of our webinar today, and this will help also answer some of questions you may have, Katerina, on learning. So as part of this Fair Finance for Children analysis project and pilots, we have put together a learning strategy to support the project teams to document and share knowledge on the application of the Fair Finance analysis toolkits, and help us reflect on successes and areas for improvement in order to finalize the toolkit based on use and application from those pilot countries. So the tools that we have proposed are the following. We have put together a Fair Finance analysis pre- and post-assessment questionnaire. We are also put together a project journal to be used on a day-to-day basis to record successes, challenges, and areas for improvement, a feedback form, and we are strongly encouraging country offices to conduct lessons learned workshop to finalize their reflections on the use of these tools. If I can just go into a little bit more details on the pre- and post-assessment questionnaire. So as part of this toolkit pilot, we reached out to all project participants in the 5 countries that were initially included in the pilot to assess their capacities in the 3 finance analysis areas, so namely financial barriers, political economy analysis, and budget equity. So it was administered to a total of 22 participants. We got 17 responses. And in terms of competencies, knowledge around financial barriers, there was knowledge on the Fair Finance Guarantee as part of the Every Last Child campaign. That was good, but there was limited confidence overall in conducting fair finance analysis. More confidence in conducting analysis on the drivers of child poverty at household level. There was mixed knowledge about the different types of costs preventing children from accessing essential services. There was no knowledge on tools and methodologies to assess financial barriers. And finally, the knowledge on the social economic policies that governments can use to address those financial barriers was fair to limited. So based on these results that we got from these pre-assessment questionnaires, we tailored the toolkit and made sure they answer to those capacity gaps. And a similar questionnaire will be administered to the project participants at the end of the pilot, which is in a couple of months' time, to assess the changes in knowledge, competencies, and overall confidence in conducting those analyses. In terms of very concrete, simple methodology to record day-to-day feedback on the analysis work, we have proposed those pilot countries to use a project journal. You have an example of the categories below, where country offices can record any type of learning, whether it's a problem, whether it's a success, whether it's an area of improvement, pertaining to the overall coordination of the analysis, resource time management, technical support from the steering group, that's us, the CRG, and the Child Poverty Global Themes, on training, on the data collection, data review, and analysis phases, on the analysis quality management, the application of analysis findings, or any specific feedback on the tools themselves as Tanzania has provided. So this project journal, we hope, will be used as part of the final learning processes to reflect on successes and challenges. We have also put together feedback forms to be administered to all or sample of the training, workshop, interview, survey, or discussion participants, so all these primary data collection methodologies, to obtain their feedback on the organization, the content, and the results of the analysis activity carried out. And this offers us external perception on the competencies, the knowledge, and the confidence of the staff that are delivering or that are conducting these analysis activities, to assess whether, yes, externally, the perceptions on those elements are good. I have put you an example of a question as part of this feedback form on how to rate a moderator's knowledge on the subject matter that was covered during the specific analysis activity. And finally, so as part of the pilot, we will have a lessons learned workshop at the end of the pilot, where participants will come together and generally reflect on the tools that were developed, their applicability, the use, the quality of the findings that are coming out from the research methodologies used, all of that to contribute to improve, enhance the tools that have been developed, and finalize this toolkit. And very much so, we are encouraging countries who are interested in using the Fair Finance for Children analysis toolkit to also use those learning methodologies and take time to learn from the analysis that is ongoing. On this note, I think we will conclude this webinar today. Many thanks to all of you who participated. Many thanks to the moderators from the Child Poverty Global Team, Richard, Sicely, and Samira, for all your great work. Many thanks to the Tanzania Country Office, Anita and Jasminga, for your wonderful example you provided. Thank you to Michael and Shamila and Lene from the CRG Global Team for your support. And I wish you well and see you on Wednesday for the Equity Budget webinar. Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.